Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is Rockin Dog Studio. I am Kristin Donnan, a publisher, writer, screenwriter, filmmaker. And today, because I'm talking with a counselor, I'll also be a certified counselor and a mediator. With me is Kate Macnamara, who is a counselor, a transformative psychotherapist, founder of Jesmering Counseling Services in Australia, and the author of a combined trilogy called Wholehearted Revolution, which I was honored to be able to edit. We first met because we both attended a workshop that had to do with trauma release. I went as a writer, you went as a professional. Kate, how long ago was that when we first met?
I was back in 2017, believe it or not.
Oh, my heavens. It feels like yesterday, but we have done a lot of work, haven't we?
We have
So,
since then, indeed.
so since that time, so what's 8 years ago, when I was able to help you get your work into birthing. I got to see what you were doing, and it was an incredible venture, a multi-tiered, life-changing personal journey put into words. It took 2 years of our working together on top of I think it was 9 years for you of taking notes. And in that process, we discovered we have many shared interests, including ranch life. So we get to talk about cows. So that keeps us amused. But today we're going to wear our psychology hats and our writer and editor hats. And so when we were at that workshop, you told me about your journey, and I'll admit at the time I had no idea of the potential impact it would have for people all over the globe, or that it would result in such a manuscript that would be so impactful, or that I would get to become your editor. But first, let's talk about the real source of that project, which is your work in transformative psychotherapy. Could you first just tell me, what does that mean to you?
To me, it means it's about healing at a causal level. Like we often learn to, in our daily lives, we do need to know how to de-escalate our nervous systems, how to process our reactions and our fears and support ourselves. Yet, if we don't heal or treat, at a causative level, and that's our traumas and the deep programming in our minds, often what we're experiencing repeats in our lives. Themes repeat, or certain situations or events can trigger us, and that can be really disempowering because then we're reacting rather than having the choice to respond. So it's about that deep transformational work, that creates real and lasting change.
Would you say that most therapy is transformative, or that it's meant to be? Or do you think that transformative psychotherapy is its own niche?
I mean, transformative psychotherapy is used in a few different ways around the world, but I feel it certainly is its own place. Many approaches um, really are looking at treating symptoms. A lot of mental health approaches are treating symptoms, and they do need to be treated to alleviate what an individual or families, relationships are coping with. However, yeah, it does need to be, it's something different. There needs to be more than that. And there are different types of therapies that are addressing and beginning to address more and more at that causative level, but it's not commonly known, I feel, um, where we need to go within ourselves to heal and the types of support to help us holistically heal.
I feel as a certified counselor, I don't practice as you do, but I think that it isn't something that people are usually talking about when they're talking about their style of therapy, which most counselors do choose one. So I feel that possibly your work is actually making more people aware of this style of therapy. Do you feel that it was the main topic of your book, or was transformative therapy used in the story that you're telling in your book?
I feel it sort of evolved in the book. I was already working in that way to a large degree, but it evolves more in the book. And to understand why it's important and what that entails and what it means and what it leads to in our lives afterwards.
I feel that a lot of times people talk kind of freely or not frivolously, but maybe without realizing the impact of the words, like healing, like everything's meant to, oh, to be healing. Um, how how is transformative psychotherapy different in a person's work toward actually changing his or her or their life?
Yeah, it's very grounded and practical. And I mean, healing itself's often misunderstood because it's not about magical fixes.
Hmm.
We're all living with the complexities of our lives. We're all, and events happen in our lives. But it's about freeing us from, the wounds of the past that might inhibit us, or the deep fears or self-limiting beliefs that inhibit or trap us in certain patterns. So it's a very grounded, practical yet holistic way of becoming who we actually authentically are. So it's not transforming to becoming something other than what we are. It's allowing us to be free to be who we are and free to be able to respond in a way that we would choose to in life.
And so often as a person who reads texts and tries to help people clarify their actual meaning, whether that means clarify in their own selves, their own understanding of what they're saying, or clarify in the words they're using for the reader. I found in reading your work that you are astonishingly adept at making some sort of nebulous ideas concrete. And I think that one of the ways you did that was by talking about your own story, talking about how you recognized what was happening to you and how you applied these things in your own life. But you didn't stop there. The story has many, many layers.
Mhm.
But I think the one really important bit, and I think, isn't it what drove you, is how this work and this approach in your story can illuminate for everyone how people across the world can be impacted. Do you believe that it's possible to make such a transformative change, such a profound change on a large scale?
Yes, I do. I feel that every time any of us release fear or wounds or we heal our griefs, etc., every time one of us is able to respond rather than function from a reaction within ourselves, it creates a ripple effect. And it does affect our what's called our collective consciousness, which has been spoken about many times by, for example, Carl Jung, that we have a collective consciousness. The human race does and our world does. So I can't help but wonder myself that every time any one of us creates healthy change within inside of ourselves, and then within our immediate relationships and further out, it positively impacts um, the collective consciousness, the consciousness as a whole. And that's an incredible thing to know that we have the power to do that. Every one of us that has the opportunity or the means or the circumstances that can lead to healing, we can do that.
So, are you saying that if I were to work on and successfully manage some of the traumas that I might have had in my life, and someone down the street in my little town does the same, that by being better, feeling better, living better lives, that we could help influence everyone else around us? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I do. And it goes into different levels of consciousness too. It affects the immediate, but that collective consciousness, it impacts at levels that we often don't even realize or see or understand. But there is, as I said, Carl Jung's one of the ones who's really written about that and talked about that it does. And we've seen that happen. For example, in the 1960s, there was quite a shift with, there was quite a revolution that happened in the 1960s coming out of World War II era, the 50s. And it started, but that then began to we saw that shift around the world. Attitudes changed, beliefs shifted, how people approach things shifted. So there was a huge, revolution of consciousness then in the 1960s, one of the ones that we really can look back and see it for real. Yeah.
So basically, if we're not all dragging behind us our pain and suffering, uh, or if that bag of suffering is smaller, then our collective bag of suffering can be smaller.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. I feel that's true. Yeah.
And do you feel that your work as a therapist, like the scientific part, the study part, the actual knowledge base you had, did that inform your interpretation of what was happening to you and how you wrote it down?
It was helpful for me to have the background understanding, but when we're living through something ourselves, it's obviously very different as well. And to feel very vulnerable at times in healing in my own journey. But doing it for real is something that you cannot obtain at university. It's that
Mhm.
level, that experiential um, experience of it all that
Mm.
needs to be, I think, lived through to free me to be able to be in presence with another. I do believe that we can only really be in presence with another to the degree we've been within ourselves, to free ourselves. It doesn't mean that you suddenly become perfect or anything like that. Far from it. You know, I think we all remain quite vulnerable in our humanity, in our humanness. But yeah, it does. I think the journey does inform it. Did it make it easier for me to have some background? Yes, at times no. I think I was vulnerable at times to have expectations on myself, to do better at something or not be affected by something as much as I was.
And how long were you working as a therapist before this project took form?
Many years. I think the project began in 2012. So I'd been a therapist since the early 2002, around that time that I was beginning to practice. So some years I was already running workshops and some retreats about empowerment and healing, that sort of work, as well as the work in the practice.
Mm. And then what was your origin story, that inciting incident? What inspired you to dive into this project?
Um, it was a meditate. I was in a meditation, and one of those spontaneous meditations, not one where you sit down and intend to meditate. I naturally just sort of be a meditative experience, and it was a spiritual experience where I really felt guided to document what was occurring in my life and what was to occur. And I had no idea at the time why or what that would entail or for how long that would be. But it was
Mm.
felt so clear in my being that from that point I did begin. I recorded if I'd been somewhere, I'd make recordings of it. I kept emails and documents. It was a huge amount of work that I collected.
Well, and it was, believe me, I I saw it, and I very much appreciated the effort you took to organize all of that material, years and years worth of observations. And so delving into that, it became a very complex undertaking, and it resulted in 3 books, which you put together in one volume in Australia, and we're considering maybe breaking them into a separate trilogy here. Um, but can you say a little bit about how you wove together the themes? Those I can't even remember how many. I remember looking at the document and all the arrows and everything. Can you say a bit how you did that, how you organized it, and what they were? What were the themes?
Oh, there's many themes in it, from, self-discovery to inner healing to overcoming fears, wounds and trauma, transformation, empowerment. But it's also how do we embody our authenticity, who we really are, and some of the traps, the modern day traps. such as spiritual bypassing and pop psychology, how those things can sometimes undermine our best efforts. So there's a lot in there. I needed to, in the end, trust the organic flow of what happened because
Mm.
there was too much to somehow um, work around. So I was looking at the themes and then just trusted the organic journey of what began to occur. So the first part of the trilogy, the first book, The Quest, it begins where things are going quite well. Powerful things are occurring. It's wonderful. But then there began to build this deep calling to a quest of some sort. And that's where it leads to. And then the second part of the second book of the trilogy is called the Shadows, and things began to go pear-shaped, particularly in a spiritual community that I was involved in, and when I began to advocate for ethical practices, that was not received well. So, and I when I went to speak up, I found that I would lose my voice. The old freeze response from trauma as a child was triggered. So even though I'd done a lot of work, a lot of healing around it all, there were certain events, particularly when I needed to advocate, speak out to others and
Mm.
some people who had authority, this shutdown began to happen. And that book's about the shadows, about what happens and how that can entrap us and how that we can implode on the inside. Um, it led me to a point that led to a breakthrough of that. So there was a lot of deep healing then and a lot of shattering apart. But then book three, The Portal, becomes how do we go deeper? So I needed to do it for myself. I
Mm.
needed to actually go much more deeper within my own self, healing in the nervous system, um, and releasing the deep fears about myself to be able to come forward. So I had no idea again that that's where the book was going to lead and what it did. And of course, then it becomes quite an incredible journey of where that then leads and this building hope for everybody that we can heal very deeply and empower ourselves.
I have to appreciate your ability to approach the project throughout the entire time that we were working together. I witnessed your ability to witness yourself, talk about being in it, and then also engage your expertise and your therapeutic knowledge, which actually did get you in trouble with some of the folks who don't have your training. So they sometimes we find, I mean, at least I have, and I know you have, find people in certain communities who don't have the kind of psychological training. They find themselves in the position as coach or mentor in situations that are very charged and emotionally potentially damaging. And I think that's what you're referring to. You're seeing situations where, as a counselor, as a professional, you're saying, wait, this is potentially harmful here, and we have to
Yeah.
take care of these individuals. So this is another thing I appreciated about your ability to understand the various levels of what was occurring and to be able to communicate those things.
Mm.
How did it feel for you to balance all of that?
Difficult, many times difficult to balance all of that. Yet, what was helpful about it was it stirred the passion within me that
Mm.
to advocate for to advocate for respect for others,
Mm.
for safety for others that was needed, and that ignorance. Sometimes people don't know what they don't know. Even as coaches and people who are dabbling or feeling called to something, but they don't really understand trauma, for example, the harm it can cause, that it can re-traumatize and it can traumatize. So I felt very called and very passionate about that. And that's what also built a fire in my belly to help me to move through what was occurring personally, because that's,
Mm.
if that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, it does, and it was a joy and a privilege to be able to witness sort of the tail end of the process because you were still in it, as you were writing, and to watch the different parts of your brain and your various intelligences take their turn, at interpreting what you were doing. I wonder, are you able to, this might be too much to ask, but do you have a couple of takeaways from the book that could sort of entice someone to sort of get a feeling of what they would find in your book?
One of my, I think, is for people to know, if I said something, to know that it's possible to heal.
Mm,
It's not about saying it's easy. It's not about saying, there's magic wands out there that are going to change every circumstance. But we can release the fears and the impact of what's
mm,
occurred in our lives, which frees us to then have more empowered choices and to then, to discern what your purpose is, why you're here,
mm,
what's meant to be. So that's one of the biggest things, I think. Also to say to be discerning, you
mm,
deserve to be treated with with a field of safety and respect, and to trust what you feel is right for you with inside. If something doesn't feel right, no matter who says it,
mm.
to trust that.
Well, and I appreciate that you accomplished all of those things you just said. And as a person who really wants to help people say what they mean and mean what they say, uh, I can attest that you did it. However, a very, very large undertaking, many layers to this story, many sides to it. It's more than 900 pages long. Can you tell us why you decided to do a companion book?
Well, the companion book was much smaller. So, in a way, the trilogy of Wholehearted Revolution is the backstory. It's there.
Ah,
So, the companion book is a very grounded, holistic uh, coming together, so somebody can read that and understand it from the bigger picture, but also to give sort of an outline and understanding of where might I go, what supports might I need, what's entailed in healing, and
mm,
to look at that and again that message that it's possible, um, and to be aware that that plays an incredible role for us all. So it's hopefully will inspire people. It'll be easier to read, smaller to read, but the backstory is there for those who want to really feel the journey. It's there. And I want to add one more thing, Kristin, too, which I felt to say a little earlier, is that yes, the story was huge and the journey was huge, and I was still living it. I was living it when we met in 2017. But then we sort of kept in touch, but it became really clear that a part of why I'd felt to go to that particular workshop in the United States when I could have attended one here in Bali, just nowhere near that far away, um, was that it led to this relationship that we built where you were able to support me in a way that I never imagined was possible. And that was
mm,
sometimes when, I was writing something, particularly the personal parts that were hard to share. Um, and you'd sometimes read through something and then we'd have a chat and you had this sort of reflective inquiry interview style that we'd just share with me, and I'd feel really comfortable just sharing with you. But you'd tease out things, and then when we went to write it again, or I was writing it, and sometimes how you edited, it captured that beautifully. And there were times that brought me to tears. I'd reread what we'd done, and it was like, oh my goodness, that's exactly what I was wanting to say, but I was struggling to capture the meaning of it, but the depth of the meaning of it. So I think that was it was certainly a meant to be to come and to meet you back in 2017, and then really from those 3 years from 2020, 23, 22, where we worked intensely. It was
mm.
amazing to work with you.
Well, how nice of you to say that. And I must say that working with you in that way was a wonderful, beautiful experience for me as well. And to be fair, you helped me also because I was trying to explain to other people what it is I do that might be different to a regular editor. And I couldn't, as a person whose job is to help people put things in words, I had trouble explaining that process. And so I thank you for helping um, put the words to it and actually hold a mirror up to our process to say, this is what it felt like. This is how it can work. And after you did tell me what you experienced, when I asked some other authors I've worked with, they said, yes, that is what happened. And then they told me their stories. And it was very helpful to me to be able to sort of identify what the deeper levels of
Mm.
coordinating and developing and helping express someone's true meaning looks like. So thank you for saying that. I feel that both of us are in the business of meaning making
Mhm.
and understanding meaning and um, encouraging people to find their voices.
Yeah.
So can you say how you feel uh, reading your work might help someone find voice?
To inspire them that it's possible.
Mm,
Hopefully, the story will be an example of that, a very grounded, practical example to find their voice. And it is very helpful um, to have someone such as yourself, because to have that support that was far beyond what I think editing is, it's the actual development of the story, the bringing the real meaning into manifestation. That's a
mm.
whole deeper level. So yeah.
So it is possible. I agree with you, and I would say I would add this. I would say that the reason you were successful, there are many reasons. One important reason you were successful, in my view, is that you were bold and brave and willing to tell the story and willing to look at what was difficult and find the best expression of it. And seeing the possibility of how your experience, you always call yourself an average Australian woman, that your experience could make an impact in the world. And I believe it can, it has, it will, and it will even more. So I appreciate that you're letting me help you with your companion book. And our mission is to see that come to fruition here late in 2025. And so that more people can see what you're doing and then get ready and dive into the bigger text.
Oh, thank you so much, Kristin. It's been beautiful to talk to you and to share about this to you and with you and with everyone.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time, and we'll talk again